Since the first ISIL video came online in August 2014, showing the beheading of American journalist James Foley, the group's carefully crafted output has become increasingly gruesome. At the beginning of this month, there was the video of Jordanian pilot Moaz al-Kesazbe being burnt alive. And then this past week, footage of 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians being beheaded in Libya. It was the first material to be filmed outside ISIL's territories in Syria and Iraq. Each video, each propaganda blast has pulled more and more players into the fray. In the past 3 weeks, Jordan, Egypt, and even New Zealand have joined in. ISIL's output, visual, violent, and compelling, feeds into a narrative of inevitable war and revenge. This is storytelling material made by those who know that beyond the potential recruits, it is global news organizations that will find these images hard to ignore. The Listening Post's Will Young now on ISIL, the spectre of intensifying battle and the propaganda that is defining the latest war in the Middle East. Our starting point this week is Egypt.
Are we now seeing a holy war against Christians?
There's a religious component to this.
Executed 21 kidnapped Egyptians.
Every video that we are getting from the Islamic State is getting more intense, it's getting more dramatic, it's getting more simultaneously compelling and repelling.
Journalists and reporters who want to demonstrate the horrific nature of these actions are caught in a bind.
This is something that comes out of Hollywood almost. And the media recognizes the drama in this, and it's news, it has to be covered.
In the campaign being conducted by the so-called Islamic State, its online videos are powerful media currency. They demand attention, telling a story of revenge, implying dominance on the battlefield, and provoking very real reactions from its enemies.
Well, these videos, I think, are geared towards multiple audiences. On one level, they're geared towards the Western audience and Western publics, and are meant to instill fear and terrorize publics at large. In some instances, drawing them into confrontation. But they're also geared towards potential supporters. They want to be able to communicate that they are here to stay.
We don't want to do anything that contributes to the sort of theatrical nature of the display, because we understand that that is part of the intention of the perpetrators, and of course we don't want to do anything that contributes to that. But at the same time, we're a news organisation. It's our job to report on this and to contextualise it and to explain it, to say, well, look, you know, they're doing this, this is a pattern.
With them or against them.
There is another pattern, a framework within which ISIL, its territorial gains, its professed aims and its propaganda gets covered.
If you're going to be successful in going after them, do it now.
It's a template that was used for Iraq in 2002, for Libya under Gaddafi in 2011,
including military enforcement of a no-fly zone,
and was employed in some quarters for Bashar al-Assad's Syria, until recently when ISIL came into the picture.
The Islamic State's released a video.
Gruesome videos add fuel to the fire. Politicians talk tough, and the media echo and at times amplify that rhetoric. From Japan to Jordan,
نبدأ نشرتنا بالجريمة البشعة والشنيعة التي اقترفتها إصابة داعش الإرهابية
to Egypt.
تحية لأعظم جيش في الدنيا. تحية لجيشنا العظيم.
The case of Egypt's response to the killing of the Egyptian Copts in Libya is an important example of how the media is used by both sides, by ISIL and then by Abdel Fattah Sisi, the president of Egypt, in response to the killings. He's using the media again to show that Egypt is tough and will protect itself and will face any challenge that comes its way. So the media is really central to the way that Sisi tries to shape his perception among the public in Egypt.
So he's been making the case over the past year and a half that the Muslim Brotherhood are practically indistinguishable from some of these other radical jihadist groups. So again, the discourse of you're either with us or against us, and the general sort of narrative of the war on terror. So if you do not support this campaign that is a response to the beheading of 21 Egyptian citizens, then you find yourself in, in opposition to the national security agenda.
إحنا صنعنا داعش. مصر صنعت داعش.
The Egyptian media literally, not only in tandem, but absolutely unanimously stepped forward and said that there needs to be an intervention, perhaps even egging on Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to take action immediately.
Much of the media gravitates naturally toward war metaphors. The framing of war helps us understand difference.
We're going to turn now to the war against ISIS.
It helps us understand resolution, because war obviously gravitates, or should gravitate, towards some kind of decipherable or at least aspirational end.
6 months since the first ISIL video was posted online, audiences have been gripped by the spectacle of violence. In the mainstream media, the anti-terror narrative is being applied to a new battle with a new enemy. An enemy whose propaganda is one of its most powerful weapons.
One of their main strengths is that they can intimidate people, and the media actually does play a role in this. ISIL is very isolated, has a bunch of places where it exists in very small numbers, and when they're fought against with military force, international troops, local troops, they're immediately pushed back. So they're not that strong a military group. The media has to be careful about this.
I think one of the structural problems of this whole story is the way in which it's too often framed as, the West versus terrorists, where it clearly is part of a huge internal battle within the Arab and Muslim world about political change, legitimacy, and so on and so forth. And you see some of that. I think, for example, the Jordanians are quite good at making the point that this has got nothing to do with Islam. These are people who are usurping any sense of legitimacy.
There is a problem in many ways in the media blindly following the calls for intervention, military intervention to defeat ISIL. The media really should analyze much more clearly what actually happens when foreign military intervention takes place in the Middle East. The record of the last 14 years has been pretty dismal in terms of the ability of Western powers to use military force to defeat al-Qaeda and stop the terrorism. Exactly the opposite has happened.
On the download this week, our viewers on the ISIL propaganda battle.
Part of the problem with the media coverage of ISIL is that there's so much emphasis put on the videos that they put out. For example, the beheadings. You find that they're doing 24-hour media coverage on specific cases, and while what ISIL did is horrific, if not horrendous, you're just adding to the PR propaganda machine, and that's exactly what ISIL wants everyone to do.
Fox News, for example, which is a very hawkish, pro-war channel, was the only channel that showed the video of the Jordanian pilot being burned to death in its entirety. And there's a reason for that. The station's ideologues, they want people to be outraged. They want people to support further military efforts against the Islamic State. And meanwhile, the Islamic State looks at this as an opportunity to get more attention.